Hello everyone, welcome back to Spar&Brawl. Hope you're having a decent day. So as always, I'm joined by my co-host Sam. So we wanted to make a little video on this debate that Ben Shapiro had with Khanna on the $15 minimum wage. So the reason that I said debate is because it lasted 15 minutes. That included Ben Shapiro's VPN ad in the middle, which was about 20 to 30 seconds. And I mean, I don't know how much you can call the debate when Ben Shapiro is also the moderator with even more control than a moderator does. You know, he would say what he wanted, put in little sneaky comments.
Counterpoint is that we are not producing incredible wealth. These companies are producing incredible wealth because they know how to run the business better than members of government who are, getting their salary from me, frankly, and from these businesses that actually are paying extraordinary levels of tax. Representative Khanna, I really appreciate you coming on the program.
Here and there, and then throw it back to Khanna. But you can see why Ben Shapiro kind of had him. I mean, he looks very good for him, you know. It's like the only time he has this debate, so it looks like he's reaching out. That's what everybody in the comments wrote, and we'll get into the comments, by the way, at the end to see who won this debate. Kind of, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was a win-win situation for Ben Shapiro, but kudos for Khanna going there, and it seems to have been a good idea. So I was just thinking, Sam, I'll give my kind of opinion about minimum wage, and then ask you if you have something to say, and then we'll break down their arguments, if that sounds okay with you.
Sure.
So basically, this is what I think minimum wage should be set at. I mean, all these arguments about the impact on economy and all this, these are important, but it should be secondary. I mean, I think anybody who works should be able to sustain themselves and maybe one kid or one child or so. And I mean, that's kind of what the ILO recommends. So when the ILO recommends how much minimum wage should be, they say they should take account of the needs of workers and their families, taking into account the general level of wages in the country, the cost of living, social security benefits, and the relative living standards of other social groups. So it's all about making sure that the person who's working can, cover their life with this one job. So that means that they shouldn't need to go get a second job, or that they shouldn't be, very close to the poverty line. For instance, I calculated if you make $8 an hour, you only make $3,000 more per year than the poverty line in the United States. So that's kind of where I stand on the minimum wage. I mean, the most important thing is that it should be at a level that you can sustain yourself, pretty much a family, more or less. I mean, if you have a big family, of course, it should be more than one person working. And I know that this isn't the case in most places around the world, but this is what we should strive for. So before we get into the arguments, what do you think of my point of view here, and anything about minimum wage you want to say?
No, I pretty much agree completely. I mean, the specific rate depends on the governmental services provided, I suppose. Do you need to pay for your education? Do you need to pay for your healthcare or not? But I would say that, and I think it depends on the government spending and government income and government budget and all that. But for sure, America is the richest country in the world, can afford a higher minimum wage. And I think it should be, generally speaking, it should be pegged to inflation rate. So that way people, over time, people won't lose money as time passes. And I think based on most studies, if American minimum wage was pegged to the rate of inflation, it would be somewhere around $22, $24 or something like that. And if it was pegged to the same level as the bankers' bonuses, there was a report just out about this, I think, it would be somewhere around $44.
Wow.
If it had the same amount of increase as they had. I think Kyle Kalinske covered that. I think it would be around $44. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and I've seen the chart that if it keeps up with productivity, if it had kept up with productivity, it should be somewhere between $20 to $25.
Oh, all right.
Like
so
you
maybe
mentioned.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
But I mean, from what I remember, it was inflation rate. But yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah, they do both, I think. There's a bunch of little charts that everybody has seen. I was going to mention those, so I'll show them on the screen after. I'm pretty sure most people and their mother have seen that chart where, where the wage, but there's so many. I just Googled it quickly. They're like all different ones with different sources. But okay, let's get into some of their like arguments made and some of the main
But
points, and then at the
I
yeah,
would say it's more of an interview than a debate, really.
I mean he calls it a debate,
Yeah, but I mean, you can
and they
call.
try rebuking each other kind of. But yeah, I know you're right.
Yeah, there is a great Batman versus Superman line, but yeah, it's too long and I don't remember it. But people who know what I'm talking about. But you can
Okay.
call whatever something something. But yeah, no.
No, 100% you're right. I mean, it doesn't qualify as a debate really, but okay. That's what they call them. So the first point that they kind of start with is that it leads to job losses and that companies don't have money to do this. And I mean, he probably uses this word mom and pop store a half dozen times. I mean, that's his whole argument. Everything is about the mom and pop store, so they can't afford it and all this. So there are a lot of studies which show that no, increasing the minimum wage will not lead to substantial job losses. Of course, there could be some at the margins and all this. And Ro kinda accepts all this, and then he says, "Well, this is again where the government comes in to make up for some of these deficiencies." And I also looked at where Americans work, right? So in 2014, 40% were employed at large or very large company. So tens of thousands of people pretty much. Over 25% worked at mid-sized companies and 34% worked at small companies. A small company is one with 100 people and fewer. So, I mean, this whole narrative of the mom and pop store, I understand. I wonder how much it is a reflection of real life now. And of course, there are a lot of small businesses out there. That's not what I'm saying. But, I mean, if there are some, in some situations, who can't afford it, Rokana says, well, of course, we come up with, we can do something to help them out. He says, there are tax measures and other things that you can do. But also, I mean, I don't want to sound like inconsiderate and, we should try to avoid this. But also, that's why it's hard to run a business. You can't be like, okay, if I paid my employee $1 for sure, I could run a business. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
main
exactly.
challenge of business. That's the issue.
Running cost, yeah. No, but and there are, I think in the UK, for example, uh, minimum age doesn't kick in until you're 21 or something. And if you're a company hiring less than 4 people or 5 people or something, you don't have to pay minimum wage. Like, there are all these exceptions
Exactly.
you can put in, like, let's say mom and pop shops or whatever, however you want to define them as let's say a business that employs less than 4 people or a business that earns less than a certain amount, you can just exempt them. That's not that difficult. And for big businesses, because they even have problems with, with paying minimum wage and all that. I mean, it's usually the problem is in the structure that they pay a lot of, high amounts to management, and then they pay very little to the labor. So there needs to be a balancing there, I
Exactly.
think. And or they want to pay dividends to shareholders so they can pay the labor cost. So, and as you said, it's business. So yeah, you have to, like, sure. I mean, okay, let's say if the businesses stay in business because we don't want businesses to go out of business because of minimum wage, and then everybody works for 30 cents
Yeah.
per hour. Well, that's not that good, is it? You know what I mean? Like, you can't just put, yeah, and
Yeah.
$7 or $8 is too little right now.
Yeah, exactly. $7.25. And the United States is a gigantic country, so maybe some things don't work everywhere the same way as good. And that's the one decent point Ben Shapiro makes at the end, kinda. So we'll get to it. But yeah, then the second point that he makes is that, oh, most people don't work at the minimum wage anyway. Oh, sorry, before I say that, that was really interesting what you said about the UK. Sorry, so you in the UK, based on your understanding, that minimum wage doesn't apply to people below the age of 21.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was 21 or 18 or something. Yeah, but if you're, for example, somebody who wants to, like you're a kid and you're working in an ice cream shop or something, that type of thing, it doesn't apply to. But I would say you can just, I don't understand what's the problem businesses have with this. Just call them interns and then pay them nothing, and it's over. Just,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's how you do it.
or, yeah, slave, good old fashioned slave. Just don't pay them anything if you don't want to pay. Just call them interns. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's the way
Okay.
to go.
So second
Yeah.
one, it says most people are making above the minimum wage. That's true, and that's because it's 7.25, and the bill wants to more than double it. But Rokana said that, and I found this fact other places, that 30 million Americans make less than $15 an hour. So yes, they don't make 7.25, but they make just a little bit over that. So that kind of argument, I mean, there's not much to add or much to say.
And there are, I think, again, I'm not sure about this, but I think there are studies that show that if you increase the minimum wage, generally wages will start to increase as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's good for everybody.
Yeah,
And
and that's, yeah, sorry.
no, it's just the higher earners will also earn more, and that's not necessary. Like because you are earning more than minimum wage does not necessarily mean you are earning according to what your output is necessarily. Except some people, I think, majority of jobs are underpaid, really largely.
Yeah, and then you also say, some studies say this, and this one criticism of Rokana is that he's like, yeah, I agree, some studies say this and some studies say that, but this is what I believe. But I mean, scientific studies, they don't all say the same thing, but they don't just say things randomly. Oh, this one says that and this one says that. It's in kind of in different contexts. They say, yes, in this context, raising
Yeah,
minimum
but
wage, doing that. So they kind of get rid of scientific arguments, both of them. They're like, yes, some say this, some say that, so let's forget about it.
no, but that's the trick though, because most people don't look into the science and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean that's the strategy he has to use, because otherwise you're gonna get into this endless debate about the methodology of the study and whether this study was right in having this sample size, or was it right in analyzing this thing in that way. So like with Medicare for All, there are so many studies that say that it would more than pay for its for the investment it needs, and then you have all these other studies, usually funded by a lot of dubious, organizations that say that no, it would bankrupt the country, and and you end up getting into this debate that nobody wants to pay attention about the methodology and
Yeah.
which scientists got paid by who, and
No,
yeah.
you don't want to go down that hole, but you can kind of say it the way you said it, right? A lot of, for instance, independent university studies kind of find this, and there are of course some other studies that find this, and then maybe
Well,
name like why
they
some
yeah,
of these shouldn't be as legitimate. But you're
but
right, you
then
don't want to go too down this
yeah,
rabbit
yeah.
hole.
The right wingers would say that the independent universities that are you talking about are infiltrated by liberal hive mind of So yeah,
Jesus
it's
Christ. I mean,
never
if,
gonna. Yeah,
yeah, especially when you can get away with bullshit like that.
yeah.
Okay, and then so the next one we kind of spoke about it, which he says that, oh, why would you artificially boost the minimum wage? And like we were talking about, it has, in a way, you can argue, kept artificially kept low because it hasn't kept up with inflation, like you were saying, or with productivity, and all
I
this.
assume Ben Shapiro is wholly against minimum wage in principle. So I would assume he would say it, as a whole thing, it's a construct that is
Yeah.
useless. Yeah. So
No, exactly. We'll get to that. That's like actually one good. That's a question we'll kind of put to him. But before that, this is the funniest and crappiest argument I think Ben Shapiro made. He's like, well, if you say that, because there's the common argument that if you pay people more, that's going to be good for businesses because people are going to go spend that money, especially people who don't make that much money, so they're not saving it and all that. They go and they have to spend it immediately, so it's good for business. And then Ben Shapiro, the genius, he's like, oh yeah, well, if it was so good for businesses are profit driven, then they would pay their they would pay their employees more. But of course, things like this only work if everybody's doing it. If you just decide to pay your employees more, 5 of your employees, well, that's just gonna bankrupt you, and it's not gonna do anything. These kind of things work is that if it's like everybody who does it. So I found that to be just
Look,
the
the thing,
stupidest argument.
to be honest, I do think it's really misleading framing as well, because back in the days, actually, Ford, one of the more positive things he did was he paid his workers far more than what other companies paid, and built them houses and hospitals and blah blah blah, because it increased his popularity. But right now don't live in that type of economy anymore. Right now we live in a financialized economy where financial products and stocks and that type of thing are far more important, and businesses are more focused on those. So I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is, businesses' main objective is to increase share prices, and therefore uh, shareholder dividends and all that. So they don't give it, they don't care. It's not in their interest right now to really care about the laborers, because yeah, you're right. They would, if we, in times where businesses thought that if they boost demand, it would help them boost their profits, they would do it because it's a rational decision to make. But right now, that's not really, doesn't really help them. If they pay them more, they won't buy more. You know, they're more focused on increasing their stock prices rather than increasing their sales or increasing profits or that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think like I mean Ford, he also wanted to pay his employees more so they could come and buy the cars and all that. So I think the idea is there, but yeah, I just don't think that individually businesses will ever reach that conclusion. That doesn't make sense.
Look, you could argue Amazon adopting $15 minimum pay is that, but that was under pressure from politicians and people as well. But you can say they realize that, you know, you can't, like, you know, you have to pay people a minimum of something. But at the same time, I don't think Amazon is thinking right now that that $15 is gonna come back into their sales somehow necessarily. I mean, you know, they were more worried about, again, their image, which affects their stock prices and their share prices and all that, more than they about the incoming flow of money into their business per se. I mean,
Yeah, no.
they are worried about that, but in a different way. Not, they're focused on Wall Street, not Main Street. So I think it's just a stupid way of framing it. It's like when people say like they use the personal saving, is like they use a household budget as an analogy for a country's budget. It's just they're two completely different
100%.
scales of things. So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So before getting to the question that Khanna asked, and which just shows, and Ben Shapiro just gives the biggest cop out answer ever. This is the one decent point I thought Ben Shapiro made, which is that he says that, you know, in Mississippi, okay, which is where 2.9 million Americans live, as opposed to, I calculate, if you add New York, California, and Florida, that's 100 million Americans. But where it says in Mississippi, if you start paying people $15 an hour, that's like, you know, the median wage or something like that. So, I mean, that's where, again, it comes back to the same thing that Rokana was saying. Like, yes, understand that some places it's not going to work as intended, and that's when you need to, you know, intervene in other ways. And even that, what's wrong? I mean, doesn't necessarily has to be really bad. If people start making more money, it doesn't mean that the world is going to end. I thought it's all about making more money in the US. But I mean, that's one decent point that he makes. And yeah, the US, I mean, is gigantic. There are 50 states with over 320 million people.
To be fair, you could argue when you do put too much money in the hands of the people, and sort of you may cause inflation because you know, there's more money in circulation and all that. But that's, in case of US, that's complete bullshit. I mean, they've been printing money for bankers for years, and I think there's an issue with there's a oversupply and under demand right now. I think a lot of people would agree. So I don't think $15, even in Mississippi where everything is far cheaper, I don't think it would cause a, you know, inflation that was seen in Germany, because that's the worry always, that we're going to see the same inflation that we saw in 1930s in Germany. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I doubt it. But that's the most reasonable take you can have of people who say that you shouldn't increase the minimum wage too much.
Yeah. And then so Ro kind of asked him, he's like, so what do you think the minimum wage should be? Like, okay, you don't agree with $15. What do you think should be? He's like, do you think that the government should never intervene? Like, for instance, the government says that if you're working overtime, you need to pay more. And he just gives, I mean, for me, it's a cop out. Whenever you make a libertarian argument, you're like, he's like, well, I'm a libertarian, so I don't think the government should intervene at all. And that's it. I mean, I can never take someone serious when they say they're a libertarian. I mean, someone needs to school me maybe and tell me why. But anytime someone says I'm a libertarian, especially Ben Shapiro, he's a conservative in everything else. So in everything else, he wants to say, oh, people should do this and that. When it comes to the economy, I'm a libertarian. And then he says, labor can freely bargain. As if, like, okay, so people who are unemployed or underemployed, they just willingly decided, you know what? Pay me $9. That's a good idea.
I suppose in an ideal, like, free market society, maybe people could organize into unions. I mean, that formation of unions is also free, and if they can get everybody to sign up, then they can negotiate with businesses. But yeah,
that's not the reality. I mean,
to be honest, both sort of anarchists in a way and libertarians in a way. The extreme cases, by the way, obviously there are loads of people who believe a little bit and not the whole thing, but they remind me of each other, and it seems to me they both want to basically take everything on faith, as in, yeah, everything will work out, people will be good and they cooperate, and the markets, same with the libertarians, oh, the invisible hand will balance everything. People are self-interested. They don't want to do bad things because they're self-interested, because it has repercussions, sure. And it's just too dreamy, and yeah. I agree.
No, I mean, this free hand mark or whatever it was, and all these libertarian arguments. I mean, nobody takes them seriously. I mean, where was one libertarian during the COVID-19 pandemic? What was their solution? There's no such thing. They don't have.
Look, I'm sure there were, and they had solutions, and I'm sure you can find some of them on Joe Rogan Experience. But yeah,
even there, I don't think so. Joe Rogan once, like, there's this backlash he starts having with some of the libertarians a few years ago when he starts saying, so you don't think there should be any regulation? I think it's with
Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin, yeah. He's like, you think there shouldn't be? Yeah, that's so. He turned on him. He's like, you don't think there should be any regulation in the construction industry?
Yeah, that was so idiotic. He was saying that, yeah, construction industry. I don't think like somebody who constructs houses want to make bad houses because it's business. It's like, what are you talking about? It's gonna show itself in 10 years, or it's just such a.
I wish the world worked that way, but I pulled these facts from Richard Wolff about New York State, which really shows that we're not in this ideal world where people can just bargain. So this is what these are a few facts from Richard Wolff, the great Richard Wolff. He says that in New York State right now, 1.2 million families, so that's nearly half a dozen people, haven't paid their rent for at least a few months, some up to 10 months. 12.5% of New York workers are collecting unemployment insurance. So that means they're not even underemployed, they're unemployed. And everybody knows that, underemployment is something you have to take in consideration. In 2018, wow, this is serious. In 2018, 22% of New Yorkers paid more than half their income in rent. So he said that is considered to be in deep trouble, which I agree. I mean, I was looking online and the recommendation is to not spend more than 30% of your income on rent, which is already, I think, relatively high. But I mean, he's saying that over 20% of Americans pay more than half their income in rent. I mean, that's insane. What do you make of that one?
Yeah, I've read a lot about the people who can't pay their mortgages and rents and all that. But yeah,
and this is 2018, so this is before the pandemic.
Oh,
this last fact, the last fact about paying more than half your income in rent.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think the realities on the ground seem to indicate that, minimum wage needs to go higher. And besides minimum wage going higher, pay needs to go like for a more functioning economy. By the way, none of this, because I hate it when experts or whoever on TV or wherever they say that it has to, because no, it doesn't have to. They can continue this situation and let the situation deteriorate even further. But for a more functioning economy, I think it would be better to have a higher minimum wage or higher pay in general. But yeah, I don't think Ben Shapiro is too worried about facts. He's preaching to a choir that is completely in love with him, and they don't really, I don't think, care about facts either.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's a niche market. And
yeah,
yeah,
interesting you say that. We'll look at the comments after. I mean, I'm not familiar with his followers usually, but yeah, it's actually
Mhm.
interesting that you said that. So right before we move to that, just two more facts from Richard Wolff. One is that he says pre-pandemic, families with children accounted for 70% of people living in shelters. And once again, he says that in pre-pandemic, 85% of kids living in shelters didn't have acceptable levels of reading and math. So this is,
Well,
really,
that's
these are the
not
real
right.
consequences.
Sure, yeah, yeah. No, but that's not surprising though, because they
Yeah,
are in shelter. Then obviously
yeah,
they're not in good education.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, Ben Shapiro is always, it seems like, of course, he has like huge followers, people who love him. So he's always preaching to the choir. But I was looking at, the comments after this rule, Khanna. So let's see, like, who won. But I'm not familiar with his comments, like, what kind of comments he usually gets. So maybe people can tell us if they think these are, like, just not the usual ones that
Exception.
he gets. Yeah. So, I mean, they're all kind of similar. I'm not going to read all of them. I'll be flashing them on the screen. But let's start with the ones on top. So this one had 3,500 likes. Credit to Khanna. He's one of the only progressives who's willing to have a dialogue with conservatives. So this at the same time kind of pisses me off that the whole thing comes about, okay, they had a conversation. That's great. Yeah, that's a start. That's a good thing, but okay. Someone else wrote, the next person, these are like in rank, and the second most liked comment, I believe, says, okay, someone tell me why the fuck we can't have more of this. Another person says, as someone who was against the minimum wage increase because of inflation, but has recently changed his mind, my question is, if the price of McDouble has rose by 50% over the last 10 years, why haven't we seen a wage increase? That's a very good point. And it continues. Roe is honest, by acknowledging that trade-offs exist. Respect for actually coming on the show. Clash is an accurate. No. I wonder how many people knew that Roe was a national co-chair of the Sanders campaign. Why can't more politicians be like this? But that guy he was talking to was pretty cool. Not gonna lie. So it's interesting the kind of respect to Roe Khanna again. The overwhelming majority of Democrats will not come on a conservative-based show. Roe Khanna is so good at explaining why $15 minimum wage is the necessary in a first world country. So I honestly didn't cherry pick these kind of comments. But I mean, overall, it seems like it was kind of a win for Roe Khanna coming here, Maybe he managed to convert a few people or open their eyes at least a little bit
Or
to
at
some
least make
facts.
them interested in him,
Yeah,
so they follow him, so they might in future agree with his views. No, I
yeah,
definitely agree. It's a good idea. But yeah, I hate that it's always the comments, most of them become about the fact that, oh, you had a civil debate, like the
yeah,
minimum of two civilized people. It's really interesting that, yeah, when it comes to politics, suddenly having a civil debate, it's such
yeah.
a achievement that you need to get gold stars for. But yeah.
I know
Yeah,
exactly. And Ben
you didn't,
Shapiro
you
milks
didn't
this.
try to insult him or cut out his eyes. So, wow, well done. And the thing is though, with the issue of minimum wage, it's kind of like Medicare for all. It does get tiring that we've had so many debates and the facts on the ground are pretty clear now after about 40 years of neoliberalism. Because in the beginning, you could argue that for 20 years, there wasn't enough facts
Yeah,
or studies or whatever to debate. But now it's pretty much academically, intellectually, everything is over. But these people, these what you cocksters and whatever you want to
yeah.
call them, snake oil, they keep. Uh,
Exactly, like the free market argument. I mean, a lot of people now, I feel like compared to just ten years ago or something, there are a lot less people who just take that at face value. But yeah, and then so I just wanted to give a little sneak peek of the story that we're going to cover right now because it relates to this, and this is perhaps the worst fact or like the most damning one. So in 2020, during the pandemic, and also right now, according to this survey that we're gonna by Gallup that we're gonna look into in our next story, so you can just click on the video either here or here. One of them is subscribe, one of them is a video, so you can do both, which pretty much found that one
Do
out of
both.
five Americans skipped needed medical requirements in 2020. And there's some other facts, so we're gonna break that down in our next story. But yeah, anything else you want to add here, Sam?
No, I want to add something to that needed that you put, but I'll leave that for the next
Okay,
video.
perfect. All right, we'll do that there. So
So,
yeah, please
uh,
subscribe,
subscribe,
click the video.
like, even if you don't watch the videos, just make it silent and let it run. It helps with the watch time and all that. So,
For sure.
even
I
if you
do
don't
that.
like it, just watch it, please.
For
Yeah,
sure.
well, we do that, but I doubt anybody else.
When you want to support someone, watch
Oh,
it on two different YouTube accounts.
oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. All right. When I really want to support someone, I like their video. That's as far as I go.
Okay, but all right. Thank you for watching that other videos here or there, and please subscribe if you like this content, and we'll see you in our next video. Thank you.